I'm gonna stay pretty high level. I'm gonna let John, when he comes up, build a couple apps for you so we can dive down in. But I think my job on this one is to represent Microsoft all up relative to a developer conversation. So let's start at the highest level. If you've listened to Ballmer speak recently, or sort of, people talking about Microsoft, we've been talking a lot about devices and services. The world has been shifting, obviously, around all of us. We're all involved. And we think about it from the context now of we're a company that works on both devices and services. We enable devices, we enable services, we actually create some of both as well, and that's the era we're heading into. And let me build on that a little bit. On the devices side, for context, I spent the last 5 years running OEM, so I spent the last 5 years building hardware, which is, again, part of the reason I'm happy to be out, because normally I'd be in Taiwan this time of year and all times of the year, and basically never got to go out. On the devices side, look, there are more smart devices out there than there are people. That happened a long time ago. The rate of growth is incredible. I'll give you some numbers for this year. We'll start with servers. Servers, maybe 10 million, right? Not a huge number, maybe 12 if we're lucky, right? Move your way up, though. Tablets, depending on how you define them and how you look at them, 130, 140 million, right? PCs, 300 plus million, depending on how you define them. Smartphones, 650, 700, 750 million. Embedded devices, 1 billion. So there'll be another 2 billion smart devices that enter the marketplace this year, roughly. All right? All forms, all factors, right? Incredible array of what's coming. So it's a world where, look, as we're building apps and we're thinking about development, we got a lot of ground to cover. So part of the trick is, in a world of devices, how do we enable more capability across all of those devices? But that's sort of one half of the conversation, which is just the proliferation of devices, and it's just going to keep going. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I love the form factors. There was somebody with an Acer S7 in the back room with me. I like that one. The Dell Duo, you pick your form factor or flavor. Ultrabooks, all-in-ones, big PPI boards, phablets as they call them, phones. I mean, that's just going to keep going. There's going to be more diversity over time. The flip side of that, then, is services. If you've got all of these devices and you want to have dynamic information on them, the last thing you want to have to do is build a specific app for each one, and have all the dynamic content locally. You want to put as much of the content or data or information in the cloud as you can, so that all you really have to do is build a UI for each of the individual devices. We've played in this world for a long time. I mean, if you look at Hotmail, 350 million users. Obviously, Bing gets just incredible hits. The amount of data we have, 40 million Xbox Live users. So from a services standpoint, we actually run the second largest set of web services on the planet. And so we've got a lot of experience on cloud-based services. So when we think about being a devices and a services company, it's all about how do you think about those two worlds, and then how do you enable them and enable people to do as good a job as they can. And from that perspective, actually, let me pop back one. What that sort of led to from an app perspective is I tend to think about two patterns or two models today. All right? There is a historical set or an existing set of applications that are out there from the client-server sort of model, right? Whether you think of those as line of business apps, where we see a lot of them, or ISV apps that have been built, that set of applications exists. There's a ton of them out there, and people are trying to figure out, how do I move forward with those? How do I support all of those devices? How do I maybe take some of the capability and put it in the cloud? But if I look at the developers in the world, and we look at sort of pro developers, people who do it for a living, people who do it part-time, about half of the pro developers in the world still work on that model or come from that model. If you look at people who do it part-time, maybe a third. Right? If you look at startups, almost no one. The other half of the world, then, is people starting new apps. We think about it sort of as a cloud device pattern. That world is, hey, I'm going to go build an app for a store, or I'm going to go build a service and work across multiple stores or multiple devices. If in that world, about 50% of the pro devs do that. About 2/3 of the people who are doing casual development, maybe I'm building games at night and trying to make some money off it, et cetera. And startups, that's about 85% or 90% of them. So the question then becomes for us, because we have sort of one foot in both worlds, we're building a lot of platforms that live in that device's cloud side. We have a ton of great partners and history and customers on the client-server side. How do you sort of think about both of those patterns and supporting them? And from that, I think about it from sort of the Windows context. This is going to draw it a little faster. On the client-server side, look, we started a long time ago building symmetry between the client and the server. You can go all the way back to the NT days and the NT kernel. We did a lot of work to try and build symmetry from client to server. That way, when you want to do things like manage devices, when you want to do things like authentication, security, et cetera, it's a little bit easier if the core is the same. right? And so we've done a lot of work over time to build symmetry across client and server, and that worked out really well, right? Did a lot of work over the years. Now the second piece becomes then, how do you build similar symmetry into the other waves or other parts of the patterns that are coming out? Well, in terms of client device, we've been working on symmetry between Windows Client and the phone and the embedded devices, and tablets by definition are the same. So we're trying to build some of that same symmetry across all of the devices on the client side. And then if you look at servers and cloud, it's the same thing. We've taken all of the learning or the information we get from running those services, which was clearly, didn't start on all of them didn't start on Windows Server. It wasn't how it was built in the beginning. When we bought Hotmail, they weren't all running on Windows servers. But taking the learning from running services at scale and trying to build that same kind of symmetry between our on-premises server and our cloud-based offering and what we do with Azure. All right? And so trying to get that same symmetry across both client server, and then you can go server cloud, cloud device, or device and client, so that over time it doesn't really matter which point you come in from. We can allow you to sort of build applications or work across all of the families. And it takes a little longer to do this. Right? If we had just gone to do cloud on its own and had no symmetry with what we're trying to do on-premise, you can do that a little faster. But if you want to have things that over time allow you to build apps that scale more easily from client to device or from on-premise to off-premise, then there's a set of work that has to get done to build that symmetry in or that core in from the beginning. And that's how we think about it, and that's what Windows tries to offer over time. We're not perfectly there yet, but I'd say if you went out and looked at other companies, we're probably farther along this path than anyone. There's less of a seam between our phone and our tablet and our PC than there would be in Android or Apple. There's less of a seam, because they don't even have it, between our on-premise or our cloud offering and our on-premise offering than others who don't even have an on-premise and or cloud offering. So the fact that we have all of the pieces and the fact that we've worked on that symmetry is the long-term objective relative to what we're doing with Windows for enabling apps that essentially can run anywhere, can be easier to move from one place to another, et cetera. So that's sort of a high order or starting point. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on client and then a couple minutes on server. On the client side then, what are we trying to do with Windows 8, Windows Phone 8, Windows Embedded? It's really around a set of new experiences. The first thing is allowing people to interact with devices the way they want to. Right? Keyboard mouse obviously still works great, but we made touch a first-class citizen in Windows 8, and obviously in Windows Phone 8 it's been a first-class citizen. But bringing touch up to the same level, stylus still allowing for inking, still making sure obviously keyboard mouse work. But then there are other modes of operation which we use. You don't see them as much in the PC, but voice, for example. Right? The sync systems that Ford uses, there's like 8 million of those out there in the market. That's Windows Embedded, and that's using voice activation. So there are places where voice makes sense. Stylus we continue to do much more with. The fun one there, of course, is Kinect. Kinect as a human body sensor. Obviously on Xbox, most people are familiar with it. But we released an SDK for the PC probably over a year ago now, and we're starting to see apps come in. Remote surgery, people docking satellites together remotely. So we're starting to see a real interesting set of remote applications that are being put to use using that technology. So the first off is having a natural set of experiences or natural ways for people to interact with all of these devices. The right input model or the right input method for the right device. The second then is connected. Look, I got a bunch of different devices. When I go from one device to the next device, I want to have the same content. No matter whether it's music or photos or videos or contacts or you name it, phone numbers, et cetera. I want that stuff to roam. And we've done a lot of work with SkyDrive to enable that syncing or that capability to have your data roam with you wherever you go. So when you get a new phone now, all the data comes in naturally. When I get a new PC, when we're doing longer demos, I'll sit here and build a new PC and log in and have my screen show up, have my information show up. Having that connected state, that's only going to become more and more important. You saw the rise in the number of devices. That says, given the number of humans isn't growing as fast, the number of devices all of us interact with is going to grow, which says we want to have that capability to have my content be with me wherever I am. And we spend a lot of energy on that. And you can see that today between a Windows PC, a Windows 8 tablet, and a Windows 8 phone. You can see your content roam. You can start to see Office roam now, your documents, all of the information. And we're only going to do more of that. So that's a killer piece then is the connected. The third then is personal. How do I bring this thing to life for me? Things like live tiles, the ability to pin people, what we've done with the phone in terms of allowing it to be expressed the way you want it to, the relay out, all of the pieces that bring it to life. The People Hub in particular, where you can connect in Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name the different feeds, so you can get information for people that you work with aggregated into one space. All right, so we'll continue to work on that personal theme. So when you look at experiences, there's a lot of energy on the client side to bring this to life. And I brought along one video. It's the only one video today versus a live demo. And it's kind of fun because when you think about, quote, modern apps, which is the conference, or new user experiences that are connected and personal, what this is this is an app. This is a modern app. This is a Coke machine in Korea. And what they did is they put a Kinect sensor in it. And they basically took the hottest band locally who does a bunch of dancing and put those videos in there. And then it challenges you to dance along with the person in the video. And if you do a good enough job, it gives you a free Coke. So you might, especially if you're a corporate developer building a line of business application, you might not think of this as an app. But given where we are in today's world, this is what I think of as at least one of the many modern apps out there. So I'm not sure what your definition of a modern app is, but I thought I'd bring that one along. It's kind of fun. It is really interesting what people start to do. Often when I go and talk to commercial accounts or commercial customers, medium-sized or large, you can have two very different conversations. You can have the conversation with the CIO who has a set of applications and they want to talk about whether they're getting enough value out of the stuff they bought from Microsoft and what they can go build, and a traditional conversation. And then you're going to go talk to a marketing person who wants to talk about building an app like that. Two very different conversations, same company. It goes on all the time. One other, since I showed the Coke one, one other trivia note for you. So have you seen those Coke machines where you mix all these different sodas? They have all the buttons on the front and you get to pick what you want. Those run on Windows Embedded. So that's actually a Windows device. That's a Windows piece of hardware, which most people don't know. I didn't know, not too many people knew it at Microsoft when I bought a few of them to put them in the hallway and explained, hey, I'm just showing off our technology. But so the hardware sort of shows up everywhere when you think about smart devices. On the client side, in terms of development, there's two things I want to highlight, and then I want to have John come up and build a couple of apps for us. The first is, in terms of development choices, one of the things we worked really hard on in Windows, both Windows 8 and we do work in phone and actually Xbox as well, is choices. All right, if you want to build a web-based app, you want to use HTML5 and JavaScript, and you have one out there, we support that. And there's a bunch of apps written today that come from that world.